Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our daily look back at a day in history where we examine all the events that occurred on a day, people that were born on the day, and people that died on a particular day. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon to be alerted anytime I post new content. I mentioned last night that I would probably post a video where I gave my thoughts on the Democratic race for president that is occurring right now later in the week. That video most likely will be put out on Saturday of this week. I want to use the week to get my thoughts together, get a good script for y'all, and post a really in-depth video where I take a look at this race and just give you my overall opinions and analysis of where I see the race at the moment. And can you believe it is less than 1 month till Iowa and right at 2 months till Super Tuesday? So it is right on the heels, folks, and it'll be here before we know it. It'll be election day and the general election. So without any further ado, let's take a look at this day in history, January the 6th. And on this day in 1912, the 47th state was admitted to the Union, and it was New Mexico. New Mexico was a territory for 62 years prior to becoming a state, which is the longest lived organized incorporated territory in the country's history. New Mexico benefits greatly from the federal government. The state receives back $2.03 for every dollar it sends the federal government. That is the highest in the nation. That is absolutely insane. It has the fifth lowest per capita income in the country. It's a very economically depressed state. People there are not doing well. You constantly see that it is in bad shape, and that they need a lot of help. The state does give lots of good benefits to business to locate there, and it has a very low tax rate. It is the site of the first nuclear detonation. This is where they tested the atomic bomb at the Trinity site in New Mexico. So, the first place in the world that had a nuclear detonation was in New Mexico. On this day, in 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave a very important speech. This is about 11 months and 1 day before the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now that would come on December the 7th, 1941. This was his speech in 1941 to this Congress, the State of the Union. And in it, he laid out 4 freedoms that everyone in the world should be able to achieve. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Now, the first 2 are guaranteed in the United States Constitution. They are ingrained in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship. Those are absolute freedom. The second 2 were more broad hopes that he hoped to achieve. And you really have to look at it in the context of the time. America was a very much isolationist country at that time, and he was seeing the threat that was being posed in Europe and in Asia by Japan at this time. And he knew sooner or later the United States was going to have to get involved. And he wanted to make it really about defending freedom and rally America to the cause that this is a cause we need to take up. One of the things that he said in the speech that I really love, and it says, no realistic American can expect from a dictator's peace, international generosity, or return of true independence, or world disarmament, or freedom of expression, or freedom of religion, or even good business. Such a peace would bring no security for us or to our neighbors. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And that's so much important. That's so important. And this is another key phrase from the speech that I just think is absolutely fascinating. And it's what I'm going to close with when discussing this day. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon four essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is a freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understanding, which will secure every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments. To such a point, and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. That is no vision of a distant millennium. It is a definite basis for a kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. That kind of world is the very antithesis of a so-called new order of tyranny which the dictators seek to create with the crash of a bomb. Adolf Hitler was running roughshod over Europe at this time. The United Kingdom was on its knees, and Japan was wreaking havoc over Asia at this time. It was a time in which the world truly appeared to be going in the opposite direction that it needed to. Franklin Delano Roosevelt saw the threat, and this speech, the Four Freedoms speech, is one of the most essential and important speeches a United States president has ever given in that House chamber, and it should be taught definitely more than it is in schools across this country, because a lot of kids can quote you it's December 7th, a date which will live in infamy. I seriously doubt many high school seniors in this country, or even students in a college level survey course of United States History 2 on the first day can tell you what the four freedoms are. But those are as important as December 7th, 1941, in my opinion, because they lay out the vision for the world that comes after the war. And most of those freedoms have been achieved in the world since then. Get off my soapbox. The United States has to lead in international affairs and world affairs. We have to be involved, because when we're not, the tragedies that occurred in the Second World War and the First World War occur. End of rant. Births that occurred on this day. In 1882, in Kingston, Tennessee, a future Speaker of the House was born, Sam Rayburn. He would relocate to Texas in his early life, and that is where he would rise to prominence and national acclaim. He served 17 years as Speaker between 3 separate stints, and he served 25 terms in the House of Representatives. He was a protege of another Speaker of the House and Vice President, John Nance Garner. And he was a mentor to Lyndon Baines Johnson, who would go on to be probably one of the most influential presidents in American history. He was a huge mentor to Johnson. The Robert Caro books on the life of Lyndon Johnson really paint a fascinating picture of Rayburn. Rayburn, from an early time in his life, his goal in life was not to become president. His goal was to become Speaker of the House, because he understood, after having a congressman visit his school as a young man, the power that that office had at that time, and it was huge. Even though Sam Rayburn was from the South, Texas, and at that time Texas was considered a southern state, he did not sign the Southern Manifesto. He wasn't pro-segregation, but he wasn't like, let's tear down the wall on civil rights right now. He was for more of a gradual abolishment of those systems. He was very instrumental in getting Route 66 constructed and the U.S. highway system. During an era of Republican presidents and Republican dominance in Congress, that was his major contribution to legislation. He was passionate about making life easier for farmers and rural Americans. Listen to this statistic that I found when doing some research for Rayburn. In the early 1930s, only 3% of rural Americans had electricity. Through legislation that Rayburn championed, such as rural electrification and the Flood Control Act of 1936, by 1959, 90% of rural Americans had electricity. And here is how influential Rayburn was behind the scenes, working to get things done, and important to the Congress. In early 1942, top Roosevelt officials approached Rayburn and asked him to work discreetly with Congress to gain funding for the production of the atomic bomb. He secured $1.6 billion to fund the Manhattan Project. It was done almost entirely in secret. Most of the president's cabinet didn't know, and even vice president, and even as well as members of Congress. Only a handful of people knew. Only Rayburn, the Senate Majority Leader, and 5 other Congress members were aware of the operation, and Rayburn used legislative maneuvers to hide the funding for the Manhattan Project through fake names and other deceptive means in appropriations bills until the bombs were used in 1945. Sam Rayburn, in my opinion, is one of those people I talk about in American history, central figures that are, without them, the world is a much darker place. And Sam Rayburn rightfully has an office building named after him on Capitol Hill. The Rayburn office building, if you're in Washington, D.C., go take a look at it. They have a statue to Sam Rayburn there, and he is a figure that we should really discuss more in history. And, interesting fact, this year when Nancy Pelosi retained her speakership. She became the first Speaker of the House since Sam Rayburn to lose the speakership and gain it back. Sam Rayburn did that twice. He did that twice. He held the speakership on 3 different occasions. He originally rose to the speakership after the death of the speaker. He lost the speakership when the Democrats lost control of the House, regained it, lost it again, and then regained it. So, very influential person in history. Born on this day in 1882, and born in Tennessee, not Texas, where he would become famous. Now we come to the other side of the coin. Deaths that have occurred on this day. In 1919, one of the greatest presidents in American history died at the age of 60. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt is often ranked real high on American presidents by scholars. Rarely is he outside of the top 5. Sometimes he's even in the top 4. Man's on Mount Rushmore. He's the only president to win a Medal of Honor that was awarded to him posthumously in 2001 by President Bill Clinton, one of his last acts in office, for his San Juan Hill excursion. Theodore Roosevelt acted boldly and courageously when faced with challenges. He saw that the world was changing with the dawn of the 20th century, and that the government had to take more of a role in life and in the federal government, and was really instrumental in changing a lot of things about American history. The wildest thing about him becoming president is, in 1900, when he was selected to be the running mate for William McKinley's second term, McKinley's first vice president had passed away. So there was a vacancy in the vice president, and they needed to replace him. Republican Party bosses in New York that were not big fans of their Republican governor, Theodore Roosevelt, because he was causing them all kinds of headaches. He was causing big business headaches, corrupt party bosses. They said, we know the perfect place for this malcontent. We'll put him in the vice presidency. No one will ever hear from him again, and he will not be a trouble to us anymore. Well, in September of 1901, McKinley is assassinated. And that means that Theodore Roosevelt gets a promotion. And he becomes president. And it's one of those moments in history I keep talking about. One of those moments where you think you've sent the guy off to Serbia to serve in the vice presidency. We'll never hear from him again. And history and fate has a way of just colliding, and he becomes president. Talk softly and carry a big stick. Panama Canal. Tons of other things. Just college football. The man was such a fan of football that he brought the presidents of colleges to the White House and made college football safer because people were dying in college football. And he thought that it was an important game that people should be involved in, that he wanted to see its successes. One of the more interesting things about Roosevelt is this. In 1901, 1908, Roosevelt decided not to run for a second full term of his own. He said, I've served almost all of William McKinley's term, and I've served a full term of my own. I've served 2 terms. He said, I've served 2 terms, and I'm going to leave. He said, I'm going to follow the precedent set by Washington. And he handpicked someone he thought would carry on the progressive mantra that he helped establish. A member of his cabinet, William Howard Taft. And Taft wins easily the White House. Taft was actually more conservative than Roosevelt anticipated. And it makes it just absolutely burns Roosevelt up inside. So in 1912, he decides to seek the Republican nomination again. Well, he doesn't get it. Taft works behind the scenes to get the nomination. Teddy Roosevelt runs as a third party, as the Bull Moose candidate. And they split the Republican vote. And in the presidential election, you have Wilson, TR as the Bull Moose, and Taft as the Republican. They finish Wilson, Roosevelt, Taft. And Roosevelt leads to Wilson getting elected. But during that campaign, he's about to give a speech in Milwaukee. And he's shot. But the bullet is stopped because he has his speech rolled up in his suit jacket and his glasses case. And he speaks for 90 minutes after getting shot. Now, he should have went to the doctor. This leads the events that he got shot. Eventually, most people now agree led to his death years later. But the man got shot and gave a 90-minute speech afterwards. That is, if that's not born again hard, I don't know what is. So a Central American figure passed away on this day in Oyster Bay, New York, at the age of 60. Think about that. He accomplished everything in his life and accomplished great things in just 60 years. The youngest president to assume office ever when he assumed the office of presidency. It's just amazing. Kennedy would have surpassed that, but just absolutely stunning what Roosevelt accomplished in such a relatively short life. And he was even considering running for president in 1920. He was considering running for president when he died. Just 101 years ago today, Teddy Roosevelt passed away. So, that is all I have for everybody today. Thank you all for continuing to watch the videos, commenting on them, liking them. Please, like I've said, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon, spread the word on Twitter. If you have Facebook, I'm not on Facebook. Spread the word on there. Spread it on Instagram. If you would like to, maybe print out my channel page and staple it to a light pole or staple it to a stop sign on the back of a stop sign, not the side where people are supposed to stop. But please help spread the news of the channel. I want to grow this channel and continue to produce great content for everybody. And like I said, that video where I do a deep dive on the presidential election will be coming later this weekend. Thank you, everybody.